The envelope was already there by 9:06 a.m., cream-colored, sealed, and centered on the polished conference table like a silent ultimatum. I froze. This was supposed to be our weekly strategy sync, same room, same time, same stale coffee. But today, no one else showed. Just him. Asher Langston. He sat at the head of the table like he'd earned the right. Pressed suit, smug smile, and that irritating avoidance of full eye contact. The CEO's son-in-law, married 6 months, promoted 2 weeks ago, and with zero background in tech, systems, or IP. Yet here he was, sliding me the termination of a 23-year legacy in one tidy envelope. "This isn't personal, Elena," he said. "We're just phasing out legacy roles." Legacy. I was the system. I architected the foundation Stravara was built on, its fail-safes, its infrastructure, its DNA. I coded from ER waiting rooms, negotiated contracts between eulogies. I was the first to show up when we landed Series A and the last to leave when funding vanished. Now I was just a legacy. No conversation. No thanks. Not even the dignity of the CEO delivering the blow. Just Asher, soft-spoken and surgical, treating it like a data cleanup. He leaned back, assuming it was done. But something shifted. I looked at him, not the wedding ring, not the resume inflated with buzzwords, but him. He didn't know the product. Didn't know the structure. He didn't even know where the backups were stored. But he knew who he married. And that, in this company, was enough. I said nothing. Just slipped the envelope into my bag. My fingers trembled slightly, but I smiled, one of those smiles you wear when someone tries to put a price on your life's work. The kind that silently says, "You don't even understand what you've just touched." On my way out, I caught my reflection in the glass, upright posture, starched blouse, and 30,000 hours of brilliance reduced to a budget adjustment. What they didn't realize, what he didn't know, was the system he just took from me was never really theirs to begin with. The day I signed while my mother was dying. The hum of machines echoed from nearby rooms, life support beeping a slow countdown. That was the setting where I finalized the RAV schematic, 3rd floor, Mercy Hill Oncology, laptop balanced on my knees. My mother lay 3 doors down, barely conscious. 10 years ago, almost to the day. I hadn't slept in a day and a half. Her voice was frail, her skin paper thin. When I told her I needed to go to the lab to finish the blueprint, she gripped my hand and whispered, "Do it here." So I did. In that hallway, exhausted and hollow, I reviewed the last version of the architecture. It was raw, beautiful, unstable, like me in that moment. My attorney emailed the provisional filing. I typed out my full legal name at the time, Elena Hartwell. The name on my mother's hospital charts, the name she'd whisper with pride. I signed. When I looked up, my mother was standing in her doorway, her line trailing like a silk thread. "Now it's yours," she said. She passed the next morning. I told no one. Not the CEO. Not legal. I returned to work right after the funeral, wearing grief like armor. I poured myself into deadlines, believing sacrifice built resilience. That loyalty was currency. That if I worked hard enough, missed enough milestones, sat quietly through enough meetings where younger men took credit for my code, I'd be untouchable. I was wrong. 2 days ago, they called me non-essential. Yesterday, my access was deactivated. Today, I was handed a beige envelope by a man who thinks blockchain is a science fiction plot. I gave 23 years to Stravara. I was there before the brand, before the site, before the funding. I wrote code under heat lamps in a drafty lab with walls that crumbled. Now, I'm just overhead. They don't know where RAVX was signed. They don't know what it cost. They only know what it's worth now. But value isn't always visible. Sometimes it lives in a hospital hallway, in a mother's last words, in a name you never imagined you'd use again. Elena Hartwell. That's the name on the patent. The name they erased. There's a particular type of man who enters a room like it owes him applause. Asher Langston was exactly that. He didn't earn his position. He married into it, 6 months ago. Crowned Chief Strategy Officer 2 weeks later. A title created just for him, one that handed him free rein over meetings he couldn't follow and decisions he wasn't qualified to make. The polished look of a man who hires someone else to build his pitch decks. The Harvard MBA. The tailored suits. The PR-friendly face. But beneath it all? Empty. You could hear the hollowness in every sentence he spoke. I remember the first meeting he led. It was a Thursday. The whiteboards were packed with live dashboards and code schematics. Full engineering staff in attendance. Then Asher asked, dead serious, have we thought about developing an operating system that can feel emotions? Silence. One engineer blinked. Someone coughed. I waited for the punchline. There wasn't one. We weren't building AI therapy bots. We were creating stable infrastructure for critical systems. The closest our tech came to emotions was a system alert when something failed. But Asher believed technology should feel. And apparently, his feelings now dictated our roadmap. He never coded. Never brought a product to market. Never stayed up through a night resolving a rollback crisis or renegotiating server capacity across time zones. But he had the ring. And here, that was enough. I learned to observe him, not out of respect, but out of a quiet need to anticipate what he might wreck next. He didn't see legacy systems, he saw obstacles. He didn't see expertise, he saw cost centers. And the worst part? He smiled through the dismantling like disruption was a badge of honor and experience a liability. So when I faced him at 9:06 a.m., the envelope resting like a loaded weapon between us, I didn't feel defeated. I felt endangered. Because men like Asher don't just restructure. They tear out load-bearing walls without knowing what they're holding up. And when it all crashes down, they blame the original architect. He thought I was yesterday. But I was the only reason his today hadn't already collapsed. There's strength in remembering who you were before they tried to rename you. Before I became Elena Brooks, Senior Systems Lead, I was Elena Hartwell. The name my mother whispered at science fairs. The name printed on my thesis. The name scribbled on every early R&D napkin. And I never let that name vanish. Not legally. Not professionally. 10 years ago, after RaveX hit functional alpha, my mentor, an IP consultant, took me to lunch. She didn't talk about law. She talked about power. They'll thank you until you're inconvenient, she said. Then they'll erase you. So don't let them need your name. Make them need your signature. That night, I filed for an LLC in a jurisdiction with ironclad IP laws. Registered every design element, every core logic structure, every biometric subsystem. Owner, Elena Hartwell. Hartwell Dynamics. I told no one. Why would I? Stravara never asked. They were too busy pasting logos over my code and stapling middle managers to my team. I kept delivering. They kept assuming. 3 years later, I got married and changed my name on payroll. Legal never followed up on the filings. They assumed the company owned my work. But the earliest code, version 0.9 alpha, was submitted before my full-time contract was even signed. So I let them assume. And I kept building. I stayed loyal through 4 layoffs. Trained execs who leapfrogged me. Declined 2 CTO offers. But Hartwell, the signature, never faded. Now, sitting on my balcony, that envelope unopened at my side, I feel no panic. They locked me out of the system, but they never verified who owned it. And when they go hunting for control, they'll find a missing link in the chain. In that space, my name. Silent. Legal. Unshakable. Not out of vengeance, out of vision. It was an unremarkable Tuesday when the message came. Subject line, request for confidential conversation. From Virillia Tech. I stared at it for 10 minutes. Virillia, Stravara's oldest, sharpest rival. The company we battled for every federal bid, every grant, every major client. We never mentioned them publicly, but behind closed doors, we mapped every move they made. Now they wanted to talk to me. When I opened the email, I was stunned. It was formal, respectful, and very clear. They had reason to believe I, not Stravara, held the underlying rights to the RAX core system. And if their suspicion was correct, they were ready to offer a full exclusive licensing deal, along with options for advisory involvement at the strategic level. No threats. No veiled legal positioning. Just one powerful sentence near the bottom. If you are indeed the rightful architect, we believe the future of your legacy should be yours to direct. My first reaction wasn't excitement. It was nausea. I closed the laptop and stood, pacing the kitchen as the weight of 2 decades settled around me like thick heat. Stravara wasn't just my employer, it had been my entire existence. I had spent more nights in that building than in my own home. I built it from the inside out, when all we had was burnt coffee and a malfunctioning server. I had sketched RAVEX on a whiteboard during a late-night brainstorm. When our CTO claimed it was too unstable and finance dismissed the model as impractical, I fought for it anyway, not for profit, but because I truly believed it could reshape the way infrastructure was protected around the world. And now I was staring down the possibility of handing it to our fiercest competitor. This wasn't about a paycheck. It never was. This was about identity. Who was I now? A discarded employee? A forgotten inventor? A traitor? Was it betrayal to protect the thing I built, or betrayal to allow them to destroy it from within? I sat again, reopened the email. They weren't asking me to bring down Stravara. They were asking me to shape what RAVEX would become, and to choose who would guide it next. And I couldn't ignore the truth anymore. Stravara wasn't the company I'd built. Not the team I once fought for. It had become something else, a place ruled by buzzwords instead of architecture, led by people who didn't know the difference between system logic and marketing language. They fired their chief engineer over coffee, without even asking where the bones of the structure were buried. It wasn't a home anymore. It was a shell, standing on blueprints they never bothered to read. I exhaled slowly, clicked reply, and typed just one sentence. If we're going to discuss this, it needs to be in person. Because this wasn't a negotiation over numbers. It was a reckoning over what stays and what deserves to collapse. Clause 11.3, no sale without her. That afternoon, my apartment wasn't quiet in the way grief is. It was a deliberate silence. Calculated. Purposeful. Like the air right before a chess player moves into checkmate. Only this time, I was the one with the next move. At my desk, tea gone cold beside me, 3 documents glowed on my screen. The original provisional patent for RAVEX. The licensing protocol under Hartwell Dynamics. A scanned copy of Stravara's 2015 IP licensing agreement. I hadn't looked at these in years, not because I forgot about them, but because I never needed to prove anything. Most companies get sloppy with contracts once products take off. They assume they own everything, especially if the creator is still showing up on time and fixing systems before anyone notices they're broken. Stravara had done the same. They mistook my continued presence for passive loyalty, not realizing that every line of access I gave them was a choice, not a requirement. I scrolled to page 14. Subsection C, Legal Parameters for Successor Licensing. And there it was. Clause 11.3. No third-party licensing, expansions, sublicensing, vendor agreements, or derivative usage related to the RaveX core system may be executed, extended, or amended without written and biometric consent from the original architect as defined in Article 2.1, named therein as Elena Hartwell. I stared at the clause for a long while, not shocked, just deeply satisfied at how well it had aged. I'd drafted that clause myself back in 2015. At the time, leadership was so thrilled I was taking care of the legal side that no one redlined a single sentence. They were too busy chasing Series B funding to think about IP detail. Now that clause was a buried kill switch. If they tried to sell, expand, or restructure RaveX, every contract would fail validation. It wasn't just a hurdle. It was a landmine they'd never seen coming. The beauty of it? They had no idea. They never reread the original contract. They believed ownership came with titles and salaries, not source code and signatures. They thought firing me cut me out of the system. But real systems, robust ones, don't work that way. Not when they've been designed to endure. I hit save on the new annotated version. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. I wasn't grieving anymore. I was focused. Because the most dangerous kind of woman is the one who hasn't forgotten exactly what she wrote. 10 a.m., Monday, one signature. The rain had cleared moments before I stepped out of the car. Pavement still wet. Reflections clinging to puddles like soft glass. The Verilia Tech building stood understated, clean lines, muted architecture. Not like Stravara's attention-hungry tower. This place looked like it was designed for people who understood what mattered inside a building, not how it looked from the curb. 10 o'clock sharp. I walked in, carrying a single leather folder. No entourage. No attorney. No media handler. Just me. The receptionist greeted me like they'd been briefed in detail. I was quietly escorted through 2 checkpoints to the executive floor and led into a minimalist glass-walled conference room. No logos. No posters. Just quiet purpose. On the table sat one folder. Beside it, Verilia's general counsel and their head of strategy. They both stood to greet me, calm and clear-eyed. No theatrics. No persuasion. Just presence. I opened the folder. The agreement was concise and unmistakably thorough. Full exclusive rights to RaveX Core. Ownership attributed to Hartwell Dynamics. Total contract value, $920 million over 10 years. Non-negotiable clause, no modifications to the architecture without consent from the chief technical steward, bolded, Elena Hartwell. They had done their research. I picked up the pen. My signature was fluid. I didn't flinch. Didn't hesitate. Didn't say a word. Because this wasn't a deal. It was a restoration. I wasn't selling a grudge. I wasn't chasing revenge. I was rescuing my legacy, from the incompetence and entitlement that had rotted what used to be my home. No one clapped. There were no photos. Just 2 respectful nods and a stillness so profound it felt almost sacred. As I walked out, I didn't look back. I didn't wish they had begged. I didn't need drama or a stage. I didn't need to shout about their mistake. Because they'd find out soon enough. They'd try to launch a RaveX update. And when they did, it would fail compliance. They'd trigger clause 11.3. Legal would spiral. Executives would panic. They'd search every archive, dig through years of digital filings, hunting for a name they'd allowed themselves to forget. But I hadn't forgotten. I was still her. Elena Hartwell. The woman who finished signing in under 10 seconds and walked away with everything that mattered, quietly, completely, and on her own terms. Liberation doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it's just the sound of a pen moving across paper, and 2 decades of weight dissolving like mist after rain. The collapse timeline. It began with something so subtle, no one even noticed. Not at first. At exactly 7:42 a.m. Wednesday, Strava's homepage banner vanished. It had read, RaveX 3.0, global rollout this quarter. At 7:43, it was gone. No replacement. Just empty white space where their proudest headline had lived. I wasn't monitoring the site. But someone else was. By 8:13 a.m., a former teammate sent me a screenshot. Banner gone. Product vanished. A placeholder quote from 3 years ago took its place, vague and hollow. In the page source? A quiet note. Temporarily removed for internal review. The unraveling had begun. At 9:06, an internal memo leaked onto a private tech Slack group. Strava's legal team was ordering a full audit of all RaveX correlated licenses. The memo had a red banner at the top. Executive eyes only, urgent. At 10:21, a friend from finance texted me 5 words. You didn't warn them, right? I didn't reply. By noon, the fractures deepened. The CEO called an emergency executive meeting. Board members were looped in directly. By 2:12 p.m., the shockwave hit. Hanley and Lauren Capital, Strava's second-largest institutional investor, issued a formal notice, immediate withdrawal. No warnings. No negotiations. Just over $84 million gone in less than 2 hours. Quiet. Precise. It didn't reach the headlines, yet, but inside Strava, the shift in atmosphere was unmistakable. Like the oxygen had thinned. People were scrambling. Compliance teams digging through old filings, panicked managers unearthing decade-old emails, desperate to trace when control had begun slipping through their fingers. And then came the moment that made me pause. That evening, while folding laundry with the TV muted in the background, a message landed in my inbox, from someone I hadn't spoken to in almost 8 years. Evelyn Shaw. She had once been VP of Strategic Growth at Strava. I remember her standing on a stage telling a tech audience I was brilliant, but too legacy-minded to lead this decade. Her message now? Is it true the patent was never transferred? That you still hold the primary license? I sat down, reread it twice. There was no apology. No regret. Just fear wrapped in a question, from someone who once labeled me irrelevant. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. The answer was already revealing itself. Ravenex was locked. The platform untouchable. Class 113 protections airtight. The license? Still mine. And soon, every investor would see what Strava had failed to notice. The crown jewel of their AI roadmap wasn't theirs to sell. They thought firing me made me obsolete. But they never thought to ask who actually held the foundation. And now, the structure was breaking, slowly, irrevocably, clause by clause, date by date, signature by signature. At 7:15 p.m., another file appeared in my inbox. A voice memo. Titled, Internal Exec Call Recording 7-12. No subject line. No message. Just an attachment forwarded from a burner Gmail. I nearly deleted it, until I saw the sender metadata. J. Campbell. Jordan Campbell. The same quiet, brilliant systems engineer I mentored fresh out of grad school. Years ago, he'd asked how to push back when management tried to claim his work. I told him, keep records. Keep receipts. So I clicked play. The first few seconds were muffled, chairs shifting, static, But then Asher's voice came through. Frantic. Wait, she used her maiden name? A beat of silence. I thought the IP was registered under Brooks. Who cleared this? Who signed the docs? Another voice followed. Steadier. The CEO. It wasn't our filing. It predates her employment. We only have secondary licensing rights, derivative at best. Another pause. Heavier this time. So, we don't own Rex? Asher again, disbelief tightening his voice. Not the base code. Not without her consent. There was an exhale on the line. A sound like someone just realized they were holding a live grenade, with no way to defuse it. Then Asher again. Louder. Shriller. No one thought to check if she registered it under her old name? Who the hell approved this without updating her legal docs? And then, silence. Not the technical kind. The kind that comes when understanding finally lands, and it's too late to undo it. I didn't laugh. I didn't cry. I just stepped out onto my balcony. The sky streaked with the final hues of dusk. I held my phone to my chest like it might steady something in me. In my other hand, a cup of jasmine tea, cool now, but fragrant still. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't triumph. It was colder than that. It was confirmation. They'd erased me in strategy decks. Stripped my name from boardroom wins. Referred to me in past tense, while I was still walking their halls. And now, the walls were folding in. Not because I fought back, but because they never bothered to read the name in the fine print. The name they stopped speaking aloud. They fired Elena Brooks. But they never saw Elena Hartwell coming. That signature wasn't for them. It was for the systems I built. For the woman who stayed too long, gave too much, and finally remembered what she was worth. So I stood in that stillness, sipped my tea, and let the air touch my skin. Not in victory. In clarity. You can't terminate what you never owned. And you can't silence a name that never needed your permission to rise. The badge they forgot to print. The auditorium lights dimmed as the keynote panel was announced. I waited backstage, heels grounded, pulse steady, listening to applause sweep the venue. I'd spoken at tech conferences before. Back when I still wore a company badge. Back when my work was introduced as collaborative, and my name, if spoken at all, came after someone else's. But this time was different. A soft tone sounded, marking the slide change. The moderator's voice echoed. Joining us now is the creator of one of the most resilient infrastructure AI systems in use today. Newly licensed by Virillia Tech, please welcome Elena Hartwell. The stage doors opened. I walked out flanked by two Virillia engineers, both women I'd trained, now leaders in their own right. We approached our seats. Each nameplate gleamed under the lights. When I saw mine, I paused. Etched in brushed steel, Elena Hartwell, creator of the Ravic core system. Not contributor. Not technical lead. Creator. I sat down. Chin lifted. Spine aligned. This wasn't a moment for pride. It was a moment of peace. We spoke of algorithmic ethics, post-quantum resilience, autonomous regulation. I answered two questions with clarity. One with warmth. One, about ownership, with a composure so still the entire room leaned in. Afterward, a line formed at the edge of the stage. Mostly engineers. Mostly young. But one girl stood out. Oversized glasses. A press badge askew on her lanyard. She reached me, didn't shake my hand. She just whispered. They used to say you were just part of the team. But now I know, you were the system. I didn't reply. I nodded. Because she was right. They had fired Elena Brooks. They'd forgotten Elena Hartwell. But systems remember their blueprint. And legacies, the real kind, don't vanish when your name is erased from a badge. They surface when you do. If this story stirred something in you, even a flicker, drop a comment. Share your story. Share your silence. Share the moment you realized you built something no one else could take. Like it if you've ever been told you're replaceable. Share it with someone who needs a reminder, your name matters. And subscribe for more stories like this, because somewhere out there, someone else is rebuilding their name. And we'll be here to witness it.